Hey, and welcome back. I'm Benjamin Davies, and this is Maker's Journey Workshop. If you watch any of our videos, we're all about trying to show you how to be as productive as possible if you don't have the big tools. We'll eventually get into some videos, probably sooner than later, or we're starting to use the power hammers and the hydraulic presses. But starting out, we didn't have those things, and I knew that I wanted to make money at this and turn it into a business and get out of the job that I was stuck in. One of the biggest things that you fall in love with as a blacksmith, as a maker, as somebody who creates with their hands is just taking as much pride in it as possible, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think pride is a problem whenever it comes to ego, because sometimes our ego gets in the way because we want to make every little single piece of that work. And we kind of get in our way and we obstruct our own progress by not outsourcing some things. Now, I'm not talking about ordering a bunch of cheap hand-forged stuff off the internet and then bringing it in-house and putting your name on it. That's not the type of outsourcing I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is cutouts. Here's some cutouts that I cut out just a couple weeks ago, hoping I would have some time to make some leaf hooks for the holidays, but we've just been so busy. It's probably not something we're gonna add to our lineup. And I thought it'd be a fun project to share with you on how you can make a couple little things out of these cutout leaf hooks. Here's how it kind of began for me, where I finally let go and started outsourcing some things. These little discs, I'd buy them from Cane's. These are ones that we've actually cut out on the plasma table in the shop, but I would use them in some of my candle holders and I would use them in some lamps that we made. And we just give it a little organic crinkle, and it's really beautiful, nice addition to a lamp. And we'll get into that later. Sounds like we've got a lot to cover in the future, but in my head, for it to count as something that I made, I had to cut it out. Well, if that's the case, shouldn't I be a purist? Shouldn't I start with something like this, a cylinder, and then upset it and hammer it down until it's that? And then make sure it's a perfect circle, and if it's not a perfect circle, shouldn't I discard it? Figure out what you want to do. If you're a hobbyist and you just enjoy making everything the most difficult way possible, do that. There's a lot of joy in that, from start to scratch to finish. I know there's a lot of projects that I fell in love with over the years that could have gone a lot quicker, but I learned a lot from them and enjoyed them. But if you're looking at trying to turn a profit, time's important. And if you're investing hours in a hook that you might sell for $25 to $45, you're not really making any money. So if I was starting out all over again, knowing what I know now, knowing that smalls are always a good mover at craft shows and festivals, and even online for us today, I would definitely get something like this. I would definitely have no shame in getting cutouts for things just to save my time. I know a blacksmith older than I am who refuses to use a power hammer, and he'll cut out hooks with oxyacetylene torch like this, different leaf shapes and texture, and they look really cool, and they continue to sell year after year for him. For me, I value my time. I don't mind putting in long hours in the shop, but I want to be as profitable and successful as possible with that time. I'm not as romantic about I took all day to make that hook. That's great. That's not going to buy dinner for the family. Now, I realize many of you are here just because you want to learn how to do the tips and tricks, and you're probably a hobbyist. But I also realize that maybe some of you are here because you want to learn how to start to make money at this. And that's how I started, and that's how I learned. And so that's what I'm going to share with you today. So we've got several different blanks here, and what I think I'm going to do is about 3 different variations off of this hook. Fun little thing. Starts out as about 3/16 thick, and we're probably about 6 to 7 inches long right here. Before we get started, my main takeaway, if you learn nothing else here today, is decide what's important when you're forging. If you're the type of person that wants to make the fireplace set from the ground up and you want to go to school and learn how to tie beautiful turkey fan brooms and all of that, go do that. That's wonderful. I know there's people a lot better than I am at that, and I have no trouble outsourcing it. It's just smart. If somebody's good at something, make a bunch of broom handles, establish a contract with another maker so you can help them out too as they help you, and send a dozen of your brooms off to get beautiful broom heads on them. There's nothing wrong with collaboration. As a maker, I'm constantly thinking about the seasons. Some things that I can make that will sell good in the seasons. I'm not a huge fan of chasing trends because they're so fleeting. But I try to think of staples that I can make year in and year out that are going to be good sellers. The entire time I've been a blacksmith, I've always sold hooks. They've always been a moneymaker for me. It's good to have bigger items. It's important to have larger items. It's also difficult to make larger items. Side hustling this on the weekend, it's not impossible, and you need to figure out how to do it. And that's something else we'll cover. I know what you're saying, well, hold on, Ben, I don't have a plasma table. Yeah, I get that. I didn't either. I had to do this exact same thing that I'm telling you right now before we got a plasma table. So what I would do is I would print something off the internet. I'd find a silhouette and I would trace it to a cardboard template, and then I would draw it out on my sheet metal or my plate steel, and then I would cut those things out. It's time consuming. It kind of stinks compared to how fast a table will do it, but it's part of the process. So don't get too hung up on, I know I'm talking about being profitable, but you have to pay dues also. And so part of that is spending, your morning shift cutting out 10, 20, 30 of these, and that way you can spend the evening forging 10, 20, or 30 of these things, and you can have them at the show. All right, let's make a hook. Actually, let's make 3. It'll be thrice as nice. If you would like me to cut some of these out and make them available to where you can order, they'll probably be bundle packs, and I'll probably try to do free shipping in the continental US on them. Let me know, post in the comments. And I'll go ahead and get these guys actually tumbled up, or we can send them with dross included. and that'll actually soften the edges on these some as we stick them in our concrete mixer, but it also cleans up all the dross and makes life really easy. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know in the comments below and I'll make it available to you. All right, back to your regular tuned and scheduled programming. Yeah, programming. Smash that subscribe button. So while those 3 warm up, let's talk about this. I'm gonna do 3 different styles. The first style, we're gonna do the chisels. I've got 2 chisels right here. Yep, and so one's shorter, one's longer, and all my chisels have a bit of a crown to them. They're just more forgiving to use, because if you don't hold a straight chisel perfectly straight, it'll buck, and it's not fun, it's not friendly. So that's what I do. And we're just gonna eyeball it, and we're gonna draw some veins in it. Don't have to get too carried away. Again, you're probably gonna get some radiating heat, so wear one of those welding gloves. If you've got like a thermal glove that's gonna keep the heat off of you, wear that too. Welding gloves work pretty well for me. Have your tools ready. So we got our main veins in. Here we go. And since I'm using a shorter chisel, I'm able to actually put a little bit of curve in that. I'm pretty slow. If you can't tell from the video, that's not something I do a whole lot. I know, just a little bit out of practice. That whole basic idea, especially with using a round chisel, is to be able to kind of stay in that groove and rock and overlap. And so you're not going a full chisel length each time, you're kind of going a half. And that way half your chisel's still staying in that groove and the other half isn't. That way you don't get any overlaps or jaggeds, crisscross matching. If you do, the good thing about using a short chisel is you can go back through once you've established your bead, your groove, and you can kind of blend all that together. And as long as it's not anything structural, because this isn't, it's just decorative, it's not going to hurt anything. You're not going to create a lot of cold shuts or anything like that. Just decorative. Now we're going to go through with our smaller chisel, and we're just going to put some smaller veins off to the left and right of those main veins that we stuck in. All right, let's go. All right, so we're just about done with this one. Here we go. That looks pretty cool. I'm pretty pleased. I'm gonna put this guy back in the fire, and we're gonna go around the edges with the ball peen hammer, and that way we can hopefully get in those nooks and crevices the best we can. Don't get too carried away, just put a little chamfer on it so it breaks up, the CNC cutout. I'm gonna put this in the fire. I wanna talk to you about something else real quick. In the beginning of the video, I just talked about eyeballing this. It didn't occur to me that maybe you've never done chisel work before in your life, and learning why a piece is hot creates kind of pressure because you think you have to get it done as quickly as possible. You don't. So let me give you another idea and a workaround. Draw it out with a marker, and you can do this cold, and that way it gives you a roadmap for once you're in the fire. So if you're not comfortable and you hadn't done a lot of chisel work and you're moving kind of slow like myself today, draw it out with a marker, take your time, sit down at the anvil, stand however you're most comfortable. I've gone back and forth today. I center punch a lot of my hooks sitting at the anvil for drilling, that way we don't get off, and I've just got used to doing that. So I do a lot of my hand chiseling sitting down, and that's what works for me. It's about being comfortable in the way that you can continue to do it for a long period of time and reproduce the quality of work that you want. So if somebody does it one way but you find an easier way to do it that way. That's the right way. It's what works best for you. There's no playbook for a one-size-fits-all, okay? All right, let me get that out of the fire. We're gonna chamfer it up a little bit, and we're gonna move on to curling that hook up. As you may have noticed, as we were trying to chamfer those corners, we weren't too hung up about big hammer blows, just little taps. I'm not looking for a huge taper all the way to the bottom. I don't need it to meet up. I just need to have some texture and look a little more organic and less cut out. I'm not, looking too crazy about all kinds of a perfect chamfer. I actually like the randomness of it, and you don't have to wail away, and don't get too hung up on trying to get into those crevices with that itty bitty ball hammer. If you wanted to get real serious, I'm sure you can make a tool just to go through and hand hammer that, and that would probably take about an hour or so, and if that's your cup of tea, God bless you. Next, we're just gonna make the hook. I'm gonna flatten that out, scroll it around, put it on a jig, wham bam, thank you ma'am, hook. And that little divot I put there, that was just because I always like to do that for my screw holes. I like to have a place for it. Maybe it's not something I like in the future, but you have to experiment and try. One thing that people don't like are rough square corners, and that's going to get beat up by my tumbler, and it's going to take those rough square corners out. It's going to be hard to get into this little tiny crevice right here with a hammer. So what you could do before you even go to forging or hammering or anything on this is you can take a flat disc and just lightly chamfer your edges. There's no harm in that. It's not cheating. It's just making life a little bit easier and making you move quicker. All right, so you notice how I didn't close my scroll completely up right there? And that's a little trick that took me years to learn. And the reason that I do that is because I want to go ahead and start the curve of the hook before I go to the jig. And what that does, it prevents me getting that little kink, that little hard spot between the scroll and the hook. If you don't do that, you'll get a little hard spot. It's ugly. I call them hard spots. Anytime you have a straight spot in a curved piece, that's a hard spot to me. So the trick that's worked for me, and I hope it works for you, is I go ahead and I curl that guy up. And I leave a little bit of gap, and then as I'm forcing that over the edge of the anvil off in air, it closes it up a little bit. Sometimes you have to come back and whack it into the side of the anvil if you get a little bit more oval than round, but for the most part it usually works in congruency with that little gap, and it really helps. Give it a try. And to do our hooks, we're just going to use a jig. That's what's easiest and quickest for me in uniform. People like uniform. They don't want 17 different hooks that all look different. They're all going to be individual, but when it comes to the hook part, they don't want them all wonky. They want them uniform. It's okay if the leaves look different, but the hook part, that just says poor craftsmanship. So we're going to use this fancy jig right here. Yep, we just made that out of a piece of Schedule 40 and just smashed it up in the vise, and that way we can hold it. And we're going to use a set of vice grips. Once you fit them up for your first hook, if you're doing multiples of these, it'll be really helpful because you can just go from there. And if you're worried about teeth marks, just make sure they're not too tight and you're not really sinking the teeth in. You can grind them out. A lot of times they polish out in that orange tumbler we talk about in this video right here. Perfect. Here we go, take a look. All right, some things that are important to note about hooks, and you'll learn this if you hadn't learned it yet. You want to make sure that this hook doesn't go above where you need to drill your hole, because if it does, and if you can't access it with a drill to drill it, then how are they supposed to get into the wall, right? This thing could even hang down a little bit lower. Something else to take into consideration when making items like this is you don't want to do all this pretty work and then it just be impeded or covered up by the piece that's hanging on it. So if we put a heavy coat on that, it's probably going to cover that up. But for keys and like a light parka, you're fine. So maybe something to think about in my design. I'll actually make that hook a little bit longer in the future. I really like these. I don't know if I like my little bob punch right there, but I like these more than I thought I would, and I'm pretty excited. Here's another pro tip. You always want to make sure your hook's square. So you want to make sure that your hook is perpendicular to the piece on the back and not hanging off to the left or the right. It looks terrible. Doesn't matter how pretty your leaf is, how pretty your hand forged work is. If that thing's not square and you go to sell it to somebody or hang it up and present it in your booth and it's ugly, it ruins it. But you don't need to waste time going to the fire with it for hooks and things that small. I always wait until I get done with my forging and my drilling, and then I go back before I tumble any of my hooks and I straighten these guys up and make sure that they're perfect. Do that for several reasons, because you don't need the heat to straighten it up. You can often use an adjustable wrench, the main thing that I use. And if I have to straighten up multiple parts, maybe the scroll and the back of the leaf, which are different sizes, I get 2 wrenches, and that way I'm not constantly having to adjust back and forth. Something to think about. It goes quicker. Speed. You're going to do something 1,000 times, try to keep yourself back as much time as possible. Even if it's just one step, it makes a big difference over a lifetime. All right, let's set that one to the side, and we're going to forge up 2 more. We got a lot of texture with our cross peen. I love that. And if you angle your cross peen a little bit, it'll actually work to chamfer. Look at all this texture. Yeah, it's not perfect. Neither is Mother Nature. But make sure that your make sure that your cross peen marks and your hammer marks are fanning out to the left and the right, just like so. Because if you had marks on this side that were angled that way, it would look funny. It wouldn't make sense. So I'm gonna put a little bob punch on this, then I'm gonna go over to the swage block and I'm gonna put a little bit of texture, I'm gonna add a little form to it. I'll get too carried away, just a little bit to jazz it up. If you don't have a swage block at home, use the vise. If you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say that, check out this video next. Yeah, I know, I said swage block, but I wasn't sure the new guy was actually gonna, go to the video and check it out. So I'm gonna show him how to do it right now. I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go there, and I'm gonna go there, because I like some uniformity. Oh, I like that. Nice. I really like all the curvature and how it makes the points stick out. However, one thing I learned from the get-go as a blacksmith making things that sell, it has to feel good in the hand. Anything that's like sharp or touches, obviously a knife, you want it to be sharp, but anything that somebody picks up at a table in your booth and it's unpleasant to the hand, even if it's not something they're going to touch, if it just has a sharp point or something, they're going to put it down, they're going to walk away. That's been my experience. Obviously sculpture and, like I said, knives and some of that stuff's different, but if it's going to be something they're touching daily, they don't want to rake their knuckles on that leaf. What we're going to do now is we're going to put some hammer blows in from the other side, and hopefully it takes away from some of that spikiness. If we still have some of those little spikes sticking out, those on the points of the leaves, we'll just upset them back into themselves and try to curl them back pointing towards the wall as they would mount. Wow, that looks a lot better. And we didn't do anything too drastic. But now most of those little points on that leaf are pointing backwards, or they've been dulled a little bit by, or just light hammer marks. All kinds of different ways you can do that. We got lucky and just set it on the anvil, and I was able to blunt those points just enough. I can't believe with just some hammer peen texture, how good that looks. And I really like my smaller bob punch right there in the middle. We're gonna curl this guy out the same way and get onto our third hook. Man, that's cool. Easy does it. Oh, man, that thing's so pretty. Oh, Canada. It's a good looking hook, don't you know, eh? Did you just butcher like a northern Minnesota and Canadian accent. There's a difference. Holy rage baiting Batman. Yeah, hope you're not here for the accents. I'm sure that was terrible. And if I offended anybody, sorry. Just got excited. And, you know, maple leaves kind of make us think of that country up above. God bless maple syrup. All right, so we got 2 styles of hooks already out of the same blank. We got this guy right here. I really like this guy, mainly because I'm not having to do chisel work and I can just hammer away randomly. And even as it cools, I can still put lots of texture in there. And I could probably do that in one heat. However, this guy right here, he's pretty awesome too. You know, something else to think about, especially when forging hooks in these smaller projects, is pushing yourself to see how much you can get done in one heat. Go at your own pace. There's no right or wrong answer. But we've talked in previous videos how you can watch other smiths get so much done in one heat that might take myself or you know, 3, 4, 5 heats, and that's okay. It's not about trying to keep up with their pace. It's about trying to produce the quality that you're looking for. And if that takes more heats, take more heats, get it done right. The speed will eventually come. I know when there's some things that I haven't forged in a while, it's kind of like getting back on a bike. You remember how, but it takes a minute to get more familiar. And it will take me a couple extra heats here and there to do things that I could usually do much quicker. Instead of trying to rush it and getting maybe some hard spots or just poor forgings, I take my time, because once it goes out your door, you can't change anything about it. And so you want to make sure that everything that goes out your door, everything that you're making, you're okay putting your name on. All right, let's forge our third hook. This should be fun. For our last hook, we're gonna need a hook, obviously cut out, and we're gonna use our ball peen hammer. If you have a smaller ball peen hammer, that might be your friend just trying to get in the crevices. We're not gonna put any texture in the middle, except for the little bob punch for the screw. And we're gonna work really hard on trying to make sure that we can chamfer as much of these corners as possible. I'm not looking at taking that chamfer down to a 45 and have that chamfer meet up with the bottom edge. I just want to put some texture in it. All right, so when you're chamfering these things, and you're gonna hear this expression a lot if you're a new blacksmith and as you continue, half on, half off hammer blows. And what that basically means is you're splitting the face. Face, face, split, split, same thing. And where it's most used is for offsets at the edge of the anvil, and it allows you to offset some material without moving the piece that's hanging off. But for chamfering this little area, since I'm not chamfering at the edge of the anvil like you might typically would, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my ball peen hammer, half on, half off hammer blow, like you see here. Exactly, and that allows me to get to those edges, and if it bounces towards the anvil. It's the best way that I know how. If there's other ways, give those a try too. No, I actually really like where it is just now. I plan on taking it further, but I want to give you a brief look, and that way you can kind of see, and I think this would be an okay place to stop too. Put a bob punch and curl your hook up and move on to the next one. Something about those chamfered edges just very beautiful to me. You know, if you don't have a swage block, this is probably the part of the video where you're done watching because you won't be able to get it done at home. Don't get creative. Don't figure out what you have laying around, and just stick with the first 2 hooks, you know, and make sure you find plenty of excuses you can't get it done. I love that. Yeah, so just stick with the first 2 hooks. You should be good. Hey, come back. Yeah, I seen you racing off to the comments. I know a drill's not supposed to be used that way, but you've got to get creative with what you've got sometimes. And that was a 2-minute fix to give me a dish that I'll probably be able to use several of times. You can even start it that way and then take your ball bearing and burn it in. If you've got extra ball bearings, have one that you can sacrifice just for burning to make those molds. Wood's not going to last forever. I love a stump. I use it a lot for straightening out twists and things in the shop that I don't want to put hammer marks in. It'd be more beneficial if I also had a leather mallet or a wood mallet. I hate the way leather smells, and I've just been too stubborn to make a wood mallet. But I guess that's another project we'll have to do in the future. If you're paying attention, you'll notice I used a different bob punch that time. Because our first one right here, this one was too big. It was just too big, I didn't like it. And our second one was much better, but and this one was too small. And our third was just right. Yep, this guy right here. And this is actually a top tool that I use on my power hammer. And even before we were able to get a power hammer, I preferred making tools this way because it gave me a much better line of sight. There's all kinds of different techniques and ways for striking chisels, but most of them involve you looking straight down and trying to get your hand out of the way or off to the side, and which is a funky way to hammer. So I like these. You don't use a lot of steel. Weld up a little handle with scrap that you have laying around the shop and grind them in different shapes. You can start out with the same size of stock and just grind them down to different balls. They're not going to be perfect, and don't worry. And the trick about that is to make it look perfect is rotate your tool or rotate the piece underneath that. And that way, if you've got a bit of an oval shape, you can always go back and clean up the grinder. And if you're not great at cleaning up the grinder yet, you can just compensate by moving it around. So don't worry. All right, let's finish these guys out. I've talked about this in some of our videos before. Sometimes you buy a swage block like that and it's a really helpful tool, but sometimes it still doesn't allow or give you the perfect size that you need. And that's okay, get creative, because the medium dish was just too big for us, a lot like our bob punch. And the small one was way too small, but it was a good place to start. And then what actually turned out working pretty well was the spoon rest for us. Kind of gave us some of that curvature that I wanted to bowl it up. Now we're going to go back to the edge of the anvil, and there's 2 ways we can start to curl the tips of those leaves the other way, because I want them to go back and face towards the wall a little bit. One, you can flip it upside down like you see right here. Yep, and go in and hammer from the back side, and you'll start to curl those edges up. Or you can just start out over the edge of the anvil or over the edge of the bick and start to curl them up. One thing that's going to be really helpful and you'll want to be real mindful of right here is where your heat is allocated and how you're holding it. If you're holding it right here on the stem and trying to bend these over, it's going to bend right here. If you quench this and as it cools, it starts to get cold right there and it's bending right there, it's going to create a weak spot and it might eventually even break. So what I recommend is choke up on this leaf the best you can, and don't be afraid to take your time and reposition your tongs and go back to the fire to get a better grip. Take your time. It's a pretty thin metal, 3/16 compared to working a 1/2-inch bar or something, so it might cool a little bit quicker. So just take your time. If it's not going as you're striking it, you're not going to be able to force it, and if you do, you're just going to create problems for yourself down the road. I actually think a combination of both techniques are what's going to be most helpful for you right here. And so we're going to start just like we talked with it, upside down, and then we're going to flip and go over to the edges of the anvil, checking as we go to make sure that we don't go too far, because you do want it to face back towards the wall, but you don't want it to claw into the wall. Things to think about and consider when you're making the hook. It's going to go on somebody's wall. That worked pretty well. I'm pretty pleased. But I can also hear that guy in the comments, that silly wood idea won't work. He's just showing us something. It's not going to work. He has no idea what he's talking about. Okay, watch this. Somebody hold my leaf. Told you to hold it. It's okay, I'll be back. Fancy Bob punch. Clean work surface, it's important. Oh no, quit doing that. Yeah, that worked really well. And it was actually a bigger, and it was actually a better size than what was offered in our swage block that we currently had. So, and I can modify it, or I can start over. I can't tell you how helpful it is having a wood stump around the shop just for straightening out things and experimenting. I cut that one down years ago, and it's really helpful. Another thing is, as that starts to get some char on it, it'll burn less. If you're paranoid about fire and leaving, I totally get it. Douse it down with some water at the end of the day. Not gonna hurt it. Take it outside if you're that terrified. But having wood things like that to experiment on and straighten out things on the shop that you don't want to put a lot of tool marks in, just indispensable. I've probably had that in my shop for about 8 or 9 years now. Same thing for this one. We're going to taper it down and curl it over the edge of the anvil, but we are going to do something just a little bit different with the hook because of this right here. That's not going to fit flush to the wall. Like I said, we don't want those tips of the leaves coming back and clawing into the wall. But if we're just going to use one screw, we don't want it spinning around. And so my workaround for that has always been 3 points of contact. For here, I think we'll be okay with 2. And what I'm going to do is, after I forge my hook, I'm going to put a slight arch in it right here. Essentially what that's going to be is some spring tension for your hook to kind of help stabilize and keep it in place and not spin around. What you're going to want to make sure to do is not put so much tension on it to where it actually bites into the wall. You just want just the slightest bit of pressure, and that way when they screw it in, it kind of grabs without eating into the wall. All right, let's knock this out. So I don't have a whole lot of material left, and it's really important that I establish that arch that I'm talking about that's already kind of starting to form naturally just from forging. Right there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap out my jigs. I'm going to get rid of this 1-inch Schedule 40 for some 1-inch round tubing. And I'm pretty sure we made this tool last fall, and we made it super quick, and it saved us a lot of time. Let's finish these hooks. Oh, and since this one already has a little scroll stop on it, that's what we're going to call it for the sake of this video, I'm going to go ahead and quench the tip of that scroll, and that way it will prevent it from tightening or deforming. Anyways, what's that saying when the word's lost all meaning? It just doesn't even sound right, whatever that is. Comments below. And that's what we're going to do here. Let me show you. All right, so we've got our piece right here. We're going to go here to the quench tank. We're going to move it around. And the reason that you want to move it around is that way it doesn't superheat the water right next to it and stop cooling it down. And we've still got plenty of heat right behind that scroll, so we shouldn't get any hard kinks. You know, something else I just encountered and might be helpful for you to think about if you've not made this tool and you're thinking about making some of these leaf hooks is my leaf actually bumped into my vise here. Quick workaround, I'm just going to bump it out. And hopefully that'll help with that issue. I made this for smaller things that don't have things going up and down, left and right, whatever. And it works perfectly for that. I use this today because I had it laying around. Here, let me show you. Alright, same thing. There we go. Right, now time to put in that arch, and luckily I've got 2 vices set up on my table, and the reason that comes in handy is because one's a machinist vise and it gives me a flat surface. So what I'm gonna do, and what I like to do most often, is I chuck this guy up in my vise. That's my bending fork. You can make little ones like we've made in previous videos, but this is just something I go to. Make sure that handle's not pointing in a way that you walk. I don't do a whole lot of work here on the back side of the vise, and I won't be going back and forth around here. Same thing with that guy, get it out of the way. And the reason I said the machinist vise is going to be handy is because we can tweak here and then come to this flat surface and see how we're touching. I'm going to do this hot today because it's just going to be easier. You can definitely do it cold, but if you've not done bending like this before, start out hot. If you are doing it cold or hot, make sure you're wearing your safety glasses. I can tell you for a fact, doing it cold, it's going to make that scale pop like crazy. So make sure you got your eye protection on and be safe. So we got our holes drilled, but this guy's kind of flat, the guy we chiseled up. And I got to thinking about hook spinning, and so here's the quick workaround for it. Round face, soft wood so it doesn't mess up your tool marks. Tongs so I don't hurt myself. Just one or two quick licks. I'm just going with one. Test it like a glove. Let's see if you can see that. it just put a slight little, just raise it a little bit on the backside. So it kind of cups, which is good because that means you'll get some points of contact and it'll bite onto the wall. We got one guy we just cupped up a little bit. Two, this is the third one we made. Can you tell it if we made it in the stump or if we made it in the swage? And then three, this is my favorite guy. You also want to make sure you got several points of contact on this guy too. I think we've got enough wrinkles where it's going to grab on the wall. If not, you can put a slight little arch right here. These things make all the difference in the world. I've seen some like really cheap hooks sold at some of your craft and hobby stores, and people put them up in their shops or in their offices or homes, and it just, you can see the black marks on the wall to where it just beats up the wall because they're not designed properly. So make these guys and make them good, and people come back to you for years. I have managed to sell hundreds of dollars worth of hooks on a rainy day in a show. If you're not making hooks and you're just starting out, you're really missing out on gas money, booth rent, and somewhere fun to eat that night at the very least. They're just a good little money maker. Something else that's great about them is you get a lot of reps, and you get to learn a lot of little things that you don't realize as far as bending and structure and placement and how to hold the metal. Those things sound so silly, but they take time to learn, and this is just a great way. Also, you can really push yourself with these hooks and to see how quickly and how much you can get done within one heat. Go at your own pace. If you go too fast, put it back in the fire. If you wreck it, start over. That's part of the learning process. Thank you so much for joining us today here in Maker's Journey Workshop. I'm Benjamin Davies. Until next time. What? Oh yeah. They do need some color. Join us in the next video, and I'll show you a creative way that I love to use whenever it comes to adding some color to my metalwork. Smash that subscribe button. See y'all. Where'd everything go? It's in here. This is a thing. And this is everything. Cool. Got it. All clean. I just recorded a whole bit and then I pressed the stop button, and I had not recorded the whole bit. So let's try again. All right, I'm sure it'll be all organic and natural this time. All right, so we've got our piece right here. We're gonna go here to the